Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sunday edition of the Go for Ball. I'm Big Italy 42, joined by Scott Mailwick at Sports 25 to Life, and we are here discussing some hitter trends. We're going to go with some advanced statistics this time, kind of give you a little bit broader of a picture of what's really going on with some of these guys. Some hot hitters, some cold hitters, some matchups, or not necessarily matchups to exploit, but some streaks to exploit, some guys to avoid, and we're going to get things kicked off here, Scott.
Yeah, let's do it. Got some interesting guys to talk about here.
All right, we're going to take it from the top here and go with catcher. We're using some stats here off of Fangraphs where you get your more advanced statistics. And looking at the top here, we're sorting things by batting average and then diving a little bit deeper. And your top guy here, and it's really not close, has been Stephen Vogt. He's a guy that, if you've been watching our podcast, Scott and I have both been talking about him a lot. Been in some great spots. He's still got a great price around the industry a lot of times. First base and catcher eligible on DraftKings, which really doesn't help you a whole lot because you really want him at catcher. But, I mean, Right now he's got a 340 ISO, 360 batting average, 474 WOBA. He's got an 11.9% walk rate as well to go along with his 13.6% K rate. So he's putting the ball in play, and he just still makes for a really, really great value play right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's really no knock on him here. I mean, the ISO's been great. Batting average on balls in play is 359. That's obviously going to come down a little bit as the season goes on, but I mean, he looks like a legit 300 hitter right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy who's batting really well is Salvador Perez. He's a guy not striking out a lot, but certainly not walking a lot. 1.5% walk rate, batting 333. The real knock on him, as you say, is he's been batting seventh a lot. Even saw him at eighth a couple times. That's the big frustration with Sal Perez because he's priced like a guy who's batting fifth or sixth, but he's been hitting around that seven hole. And I mean, the Royals are off to a really hot start. I'm not saying they're not going to be a good offense, but they're not going to be this good the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, his RBI numbers are a little inflated. He's got 12, and like you said, he's hitting low in the order. That's not going to stay consistent if he keeps hitting that low in the order. I mean, even against lefties, I haven't seen him hit higher than sixth, I don't think, all year.
Yeah.
And he did really nice numbers against lefties. I mean, the batting average on balls in play, only 321. Seems like he can sustain that a little bit. I mean, he's going to have a nice year. I'd just like to see him hit a little bit higher in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Dedios, he just refuses to bump down Mike Moustakas against the lefty. He wants to bat him lefty in the two holes. So maybe that is part of it. But, I mean, it seems like he doesn't do a whole lot of shuffling between lefties and righties. And he's going to learn. I mean, maybe the Oakland A's can teach him a little bit about that because they obviously they are the kings of shuffling lineups based on matchups.
Yeah, definitely. We got not that many qualified catchers really so far. We got quite a few guys really struggling though. Like Lucroy is a guy we've talked about on this, I think the last 2 weeks. Hitting only 156. His batting average on balls in play is actually 189 above his regular batting average, which, I mean, that's going to turn around a little bit. But with him being on the DL right now, I mean, he's going to struggle to get back in the groove. I mean, he could have a really, really rough season all season.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a guy that, a lot of bad going his way, and you've got all the way at the bottom on qualified hitters or qualified catchers, I should say. Chris Iannetta in 50 plate appearances, striking out 32% of the time, just absolutely terrible. I mean, he's a guy that usually bats ninth. Really more of a guy that hits lefties. He doesn't play a whole lot against righties anyway. But I mean, this guy, a .23 ISO,
almost non-existent. Yeah.
I mean, you can't be much worse than he's been so far this season. Not that you've been playing him much anyway, being around there in the 9 hole. But those wraparound stacks that you like to play sometimes against lefties, that's kind of out the window right now. He's not even worth a roster spot at this point.
Yeah. A couple other guys in here, more towards the middle. Russell Martin, another guy who's struggling like Lucroy. 159 batting average, 172 batting average on balls in play. The 182 ISO hasn't been too bad. It looks like he's going to get this turned around at some point. He's a guy I feel pretty confident in rostering in some Blue Jays stacks here, especially once we get Jose Bautista back. I'm kind of ignoring that stack right now just because Bautista's not in there. Smoke's been in there some, which has been tough with the first base thing with him and Edwin Jackson. But he's a guy that I think will come around eventually. Kind of feel the same way about Brian McCann, although his batting average on balls in play is way above his average right now. And his ISO hasn't been very good, only 143 so far.
Yeah, it seems like the only guy he's really been hitting is David Price. So
yeah, exactly.
that trend continues. But That's going to be about it for catcher. Not a whole lot else to note about there. Some guys hitting average, guys like Buster Posey, they're going to turn around. Not too concerned there. Moving on to first base, where no surprise, your top hitter, Adrian Gonzalez, batting .414 on the season. His batting average on balls in play is .391, which obviously pretty high right there. That's going to come down a little bit. But he's got a .561 WOBA, which is just astronomical, .448 ISO. All these numbers going to regress some, but a lot of encouraging things as well. 10.8% strike or walk rate compared to just 9.2% strikeout rate. So he legitimately is giving you great at-bats. He's putting the ball in play, maybe getting a little bit lucky with that high BABIP, but, I mean, he's just absolutely mashing the ball right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his batting average on balls in play is .390, but, I mean, he's hitting almost .415. So, I mean, he's looked great. Just seeing the ball really well right now. Has a lot of power, like you mentioned, with that .448 ISO. There's not a lot of bad things you can say about him. I know you're really excited about this next guy, too.
Yeah, Yonder Alonso.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Joey Votto.
No, I do love Joey Votto. I'm going with Joey Votto. I was looking there sorted by batting average here, so I was a little bit behind you. But man, Joey Votto, it is a sight for sore eyes for Reds fans who have seen this guy struggle with injuries over the last couple of years. But when he's in, I mean, he's legitimately one of the best hitters in the game at any position. .361 ISO is the really encouraging part here, where his power, it seemed everyone was afraid his power was gone. It wasn't coming back. But I mean, that right there tells you he's not only back, but he's back in a big way. I believe he leads the National League in home runs. He's tied with Adrian Gonzalez there. 16.4% walk rate is just absolutely insane. And Josh actually pointed out on a podcast we did on Friday here that he hasn't had, against a left-handed pitcher, he hasn't had an infield pop-up in 3+ years since the beginning of 2012. Wow. Not a single one. So, I mean, he just gives you ridiculously good at-bats. I mean, a .501 WOBA, not too shabby either. I mean, Adrian Gonzalez kind of putting him to shame there. But, I mean, he's back in a major way, and he's a lot of times not priced like it. So, I mean, he's a guy I'm going to continue to take advantage of right now.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's talk about Yonder Alonso, who apparently is your other favorite first baseman.
Hey, he's off to a great start. Another ex-Red, by the way, who Reds traded him out of town. But, I mean, much like Votto and Gonzalez, it seems to be the trend of the guys up top. Higher walk rate than strikeout rate, 13.6 to 10.6. His ISO's not really there, .091, which is a little bit concerning, but at the same time, I mean, he does hit in the best pitcher's park in baseball. So, power or no power. I mean,
yeah, he's never been a huge power guy either. He's always been more of a batting average guy, especially for a first baseman. There's a little bit of power there, but not an overwhelming amount for a first baseman.
And he's cheap too, really.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing with him though is a lot of times he's buried in like the 6th or the 7th hole for them because they added all these bats in the offseason. And they've got Kemp and Will Myers at the top. Justin Upton's healthy again now. He's hitting the 4 hole pretty often here. I mean, it's hard for him to find a good spot in the lineup. And so, I mean, even at his low prices, sometimes it's tough to get him in your lineups because he's just hitting so low in the order. It's hard to like work him into a stack if you're doing a Padres stack like when they were in Coors last week. That's been the difficult part for me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That kind of tells you right there he's kind of priced like a guy who's been hitting down in the order. So that's where it's a concern. I mean, against lefties, we've been seeing him bumped up a little bit, but that's about it. Prince Fielder, he's crushing the ball, not for power necessarily, but he's hitting line drives everywhere. He's batting .367. His BABIP, though, .396, pretty astronomical there for him. Yep. I mean, he's been a good average hitter, but hasn't been a guy who's been hitting well over .300 throughout his career. He's been more of the power guy.
Yeah, he's been more like a power guy that's been in that nice 270, 280 range where, I mean, right now he's hitting like Yonder Alonso where he's just spraying balls all over the place and not really putting any in the seats. I mean, you got to think his power comes around. ISO's only at 117 right now. That's just way too far below his career ISO. I can't imagine it stays that low this season. I think he's going to get it turned around in the power department pretty quick here.
Yeah, and if he kind of regresses in between those two things, merges the power with the batting average, we're going to see a lot of value with Prince Fielder, especially in that bad lineup. And another guy kind of a similar situation, Anthony Rizzo, not hitting for much power, .098 ISO so far this year, but batting over .300, WOBA almost .400. Once again, really high walk rate, higher than his strikeout rate. He's the guy that's going to turn around. The power is definitely going to be there. And
yeah, I mean, I think he had over a 200 ISO against righties last year. I can't see it staying that low. He's looked pretty good against lefties this year too. Like you said, he's another guy. The power's probably going to turn around. His batting average on balls in play has been pretty nice. So maybe he's just not hitting the ball really well right now. The power is going to be there for him, though, it feels like, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, nobody else really of note up at the high guys. I mean, you've got Jose Abreu. Obviously, we know what he does. He got off to a little bit of a slow start. Certainly hitting for some power now. Doesn't walk a ton this year, but you don't really need a ton of walks with Jose Abreu the way he crushes the ball.
Yeah, right. I mean, his ISO is ridiculous. I think it's 373, and he only has 5 home runs so far. So he's just crushing the ball all the time right now. And he started out so cold, too. So, like, he's been red hot as far as just making great contact over the last couple games here.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to go all the way down at the bottom, you got Chris Carter, who finally hit his first home run of the season.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, that is the only thing that he has done this season. Even his ISO, .061, 40% strikeout rate. I don't know what the record is, but it's got to be damn near 40%. I mean, that's just it. He's embarrassing himself out there.
Yeah,
right now.
definitely. Another guy that's really struggling that I like to target as a power guy is Steve Pearce for the Orioles. I mean, the rest of their lineup has looked great, and he just hasn't really gotten it going yet. He's got a really low batting average, 149, low batting average on balls in play, 156. His ISO, the power's still there for how poorly he's been hitting. 128 with a 149 batting average you can tell the power's still there. You got to think he gets it turned around a little bit, especially in the middle of that pretty hefty lineup right now.
Yeah, I'll say one guy around here that's been encouraging as far as power goes, not hitting for average though, is Mark Teixeira. 373 ISO so far this year. He's got 5 homers. So he's hitting it hard. Obviously, Yankee Stadium kind of feeding into that a little bit. He's got a 132 BABIP on the season. So
yeah,
that there tells you, I mean, he's certainly, I mean, with a 196 batting average, which is awful in itself, that also tells you he's getting a little bit unlucky with some of these balls as well. So, I mean, if he can get that batting average up around 240, 250 maybe, and continue to hit for some power, he's going to be a nice source of cheap power there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on here to second base, where a lot of the mainstays at the top are not the guys that we see here at the top. I mean, you're looking at the guys who are hitting for the best average, and kind of the flavor of the week right now, Devin Travis is up there. He's batting 385. He's got a 327 ISO, which obviously is very unlikely he maintains anywhere near that. 498 WOBA. But, I mean, it's through 58 plate appearances, so it's not like the guy just started playing this week. He's been hitting the ball great all season.
Yeah, he has. Hitting high in that Blue Jays order right in front of Encarnacion right now. Right after Reyes has given him some nice RBI chances. He's got 15 RBI on the season already. That's really solid. He's not a guy that takes a lot of pitches, though. That's my concern. I mean, he's not going to have a 400 batting average on balls in play all year with a only 6.9 walk rate. His K rate's not bad, though. So, I mean, he's putting the ball in play. Once that batting average on balls in play kind of flattens out a little bit, I mean, he could easily be a 300 hitter in that spot in the lineup if he can maintain that spot in the 2-hole.
Yeah, absolutely. So he continues to be cheap around the industry. Continue to target him while he's hot and ride this hot streak. Another guy right around here who's off to a great start, Howie Kendrick in his new home in LA. Got a 250 ISO so far, batting 321, WOBA at 415. And he's walking at a nice clip, 11.1%, putting the ball in play. And, I mean, anybody hitting cleanup for the Dodgers with some of these big bats all around him. You got Puig, who's just now starting to get it going. Obviously, Adrian Gonzalez, we already talked about. I mean, there's a ton of RBI and run-scoring chances for Kendrick.
Yeah, especially once Adrian Gonzalez stops clearing the bases right in front of him.
Yeah, right. Might as well put Kendrick ahead of him. Let him get on, too. And let Gonzalez take care of business. But
yeah, right. Cano's another guy at second base that has been he's just been average most of the season so far. He's not really taking any walks. He's only at a 4.6 walk rate. He's striking out a decent amount. He's hitting 290 with 333 batting average on balls in play, but he just really hasn't shown off much of that Robinson Cano that we've seen in the past, and it's getting a little frustrating at this point. I mean, he's looking like a pretty average hitting second baseman right now. He hasn't shown off any power. 161 ISO is okay, but with 1 home run on the season and 65 plate appearances, I mean, he's just not really giving you what you want from him.
No, not at all. And speaking of really low ISO, we have drumroll for the guy with zero ISO, actually zero ISO. Brandon Phillips does not have a single
I knew
extra
you were
base
going to
hit
mention
yet.
that.
I had to call him out on this, and I had to even do a little double take to see the guy has not hit an extra base hit yet. He's batting 288, which isn't awful. He's not walking, 1.7% walk rate, but I mean, my God, through 60 plate appearances, not a single extra base hit. I mean, that's the kind of numbers you expect from a guy that's batting 188, not 288. So I just had to throw that his way a little bit. Ian Kinsler's a guy who has been doing fine. He's scoring a lot of runs. He's not hitting for any sort of power either, but you don't really expect that out of him. He's a guy that you figure is going to continue to produce, but at his current price tag, in most situations with the Tigers, it's really tough to pay. I mean, he's been over 4K on both main sites there, a lot. And for a guy that's not hitting at all for power, you're pretty much hoping he gets on base, and gets driven home by these big bats. He's kind of a tough guy to pay for if you're not stacking the Tigers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's just not a lot of upside there. I'm kind of feeling that same way about Jason Kipnis right now, too, where he has that same kind of light power, light speed combo, and he's just not really getting it done right now, only hitting 224 on the season. Not really taking any walks to get on base. I mean, the Indians lineup's been really struggling. He's only got 3 runs scored, 4 RBIs on the year with 1 stolen base. So I'm having a lot of trouble with him outside of Indian stacks too. So he's kind of in that same boat. One guy we've talked about both weeks so far is Chase Utley. Sitting here at the bottom of second baseman still, 56 plate appearances, only hitting 120. His batting average on balls in play is .098. I mean, those aren't good numbers.
No. I mean, at some point, you're not just getting unlucky. You're just hitting the ball directly at people.
Yeah, and slowly.
Yeah, very, very slowly. I mean, his WRC plus is 2.
Yeah, I know. I was just looking at that, too. Everyone else on here is 40, 50 at the lowest, and he's at 2. Yeah.
I have not seen a number that low on a regular starter ever. So that's pretty bad on his end. Hopefully he gets things turned around. One other guy I want to talk on real quick here is Brian Dozier, a guy who's been a pretty big disappointment so far this year.
Yep.
Striking out over 20% of the time, just the 1 home run so far. I mean, he's just batting 214, and he's the guy they tried him batting leadoff there for a little while. He was batting cleanup, and he's really just not getting it done, not even against lefties, which was his strength for a long time. So maybe some legitimate cause for concern there with Brian Dozier. All right, moving on here to shortstop, where there really haven't been a whole lot of good hitters so far this year. No surprise, there's not that many shortstops in the game. They really are good hitters. And at the top, the 9 hitter for the Tigers, Jose Iglesias, batting .396. I mean, he's putting the ball in play. He doesn't really have any power. Really not a guy you can play in DFS because he bats 9th every day. I mean, if you're playing this guy every day, you're making a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, a 430 batting average on balls in play isn't going to remain consistent. I mean, he definitely has the speed. He's going to be in the lineup every day. He's got 4 stolen bases, but for how many times he's been on base, 4 stolen bases really isn't that much. He's almost at a 500 on base percentage right now. He should be stealing a ton of bases, but I guess with the guys hitting behind him, with him hitting 9th, sometimes it doesn't really make sense for him to risk getting thrown out, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. Guy who's really turned it around on the past week or so is Starlin Castro.
Yep.
Now up to 355 average. He was the guy we talked about, I believe, in the first podcast here, the first week. We're talking about how he was struggling. We thought he'd get it going, and he certainly has now. Up to 355. His ISO, really not great, 1.113. So, I mean, a decent amount of power, I guess, a little bit below average. But, I mean, he's got all those huge bats around him. He's going to always have RBI opportunities with that stacked Cubs lineup right now.
Yeah, he hit 5th a couple times in the last week, too, which, I mean, that's a great spot for him with Rizzo hitting 2nd right now.
Yep.
And, I mean, if he can hit 5th consistently, I mean, he's going to be one of the better shortstop plays all season. So I feel pretty good about him. I wasn't liking him so much, like we mentioned in the first week when he was cold and he was hitting 7th. When he's hitting down there, the Cubs struggle a little bit in that bottom third of the order. They don't have a lot of hitting talent down there, especially in the National League with a pitcher hitting 8th most of the time for them. Hate having your guy hitting 7th where they can just pitch around him. And with a guy like Starlin Castro that swings at a lot of bad pitches and doesn't take a lot of pitches, I mean, that's a terrible spot for him to be hitting in. So 5th is a huge advantage for him.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially with impatient hitters like Castro. So, yeah, that's a good point. A little bit of cause for concern there with Troy Tulowitzki. Striking out 24% of the time, 1.6% walk rate. I mean, is this he's batting 300, so I mean it's not all bad.
Yeah.
But he's really not showing much power. I mean, 200 ISO, yes, but only one home run. He hit, I think has seven doubles.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of doubles.
I don't
on
think
the
he
year,
has
but-
one in a week though. So
No, he started out really hot with doubles, and I think he hit his home run the first week of the season too. And he's been struggling a little bit since then. Over the last 3 or 4 games, he struck out a bunch. That's what's got his strikeout rate up near 25% here. I mean, you got to think he gets it going. At the very least, I mean, we've seen Clint Barnes have good seasons playing shortstop for the Rockies before. So,
yeah, that's true.
I mean, he's going to get it going at some point. He's not that elite play right now on the road though, which is the tough part. So, like you said, there really aren't any shortstops that you can just like kind of plug into your lineup. I mean, one of the better guys so far has been John Segura, and he's only hitting 288, and he's sitting in the middle of a lineup that hasn't been doing anything.
Yeah.
And so there's just not a lot at shortstop right now.
No, not a lot at all. I mean, you had Zach Kozar went through that little hot stretch. He's kind of cooled off there. Obviously, not expecting him to continue to hit 328. I mean, I've seen this. I haven't seen this hot streak before, but I've seen this from Zach Kozar. He's prone to go one for his next 40. We know that. And Asdrubal Cabrera has been a frustrating guy. He's been batting third in the order for Tampa Bay a lot, but just really not getting it done. It's kind of a guy I keep going back to in cash games because he's just so cheap. He's so cheap, and he just continues to not produce, not hitting for any sort of power. I mean, he was never much of a power hitter, but I mean, he was a good on-base guy when he was with the Indians, and hopefully he gets it turned around because at his current price tag, I mean, he's a steal if he can start getting on base.
Yeah, definitely. Another guy that's got a pretty low price tag right now is Jimmy Rollins. He's in that same boat where he hasn't been hitting really well. His batting average on balls in play is low. Only hitting 196 on the year. Obviously, it's Jimmy Rollins, so there's stolen base potential. He's in that Dodgers lineup. He's going to score some runs. I think he gets it going. He's not the Jimmy Rollins that he used to be, of course, but I think if he can get up to 250, 260 on the year and start taking some walks and stuff, or I should say keep taking walks because that's what's been saving him so far.
Yeah.
I think he can have a fine season. There's one other guy. Oh, Jose Reyes is the other guy that's kind of in that middling range where he's been dealing with injuries as always, but a 295 batting average on balls in play. He's at 265. He's a guy that needs to start taking some walks for sure to get on base, but it's never been his forte, so I don't expect that to turn around too much. But I think once the Blue Jays get it going a little bit, he's going to have a nice year with runs scored, stolen bases, stuff like that. So
Yeah. Reyes is one of those guys that makes you glad that we have DFS and not season long because always the guy that you want to target, but always hurt. So
yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's at the top of that order, especially if Travis continues to hit second and continue to get it going. I mean, he's going to score a ton of runs. Third base, this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. Matt Carpenter hitting for the best average, 386. Doesn't strike out, just a 9.5% strikeout rate, 9.5% walk rate as well. Hasn't stolen any bases, but I mean, the guy scored 13 runs. He's got 11 RBIs. He's got 3 homers already on the season, too, which a little bit surprising. I mean, his ISO almost 300 so far. So
Yeah.
Carpenter, not a power hitter that you'd expect to have that type of ISO, but I mean, a monster on-base machine, 444 on-base percentage so far, and I'm not expecting him to bat 386 forever, but I mean, he's going to hit well over 300 this year, and he's a great target in most formats, most nights.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy I look at first at third base in cash games basically every day that he's playing. I mean, he's so solid. He's going to steal a couple bases probably at some point this year, too, so he has that going for him. I mean, he's looked at as good or better than basically every hitter, especially with the 3 home runs. I mean, you can't really ask for a whole lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other guys, Mike Moustakas off to a great start, putting the ball in play, striking out just 6.7% of the time, 328 average, and his batting average of balls in play just 321. So, I mean, that right there tells you that he's actually legitimately hitting the ball well. And, I mean, he should be able to maintain, I don't know about a 300 average, but probably pretty close to that right now.
Yeah, especially hitting in that lineup when they're playing really well. I mean, it'd be nice to see him get some days off against lefties that he hasn't been hitting as well. But, I mean, I think that probably comes as the summer goes on. They'll get him some more days off, and it makes no sense for them not to be against lefties. So that should help him out a little bit for daily fantasy at least. Who else we got up here? Josh Donaldson is a guy that we talk about all the time, has raked lefties. I mean, he's just having a great season right now. 4 home runs already, 333 average, 286 ISO. Playing every day right now for the Blue Jays. Hitting 4th right now with Bautista out of the lineup. So you got to feel pretty good about him most nights at third base too.
Yeah, definitely. Moving down, looking down at the bottom, a guy who's not hitting for average but hitting for a ton of power, Luis Valbuena. He's got 5 homers already on the season. His ISO's at 320. Obviously, it's not going to stay that high. But his batting average on balls in play is just 167. So I mean, if he can turn that around, maybe hit some more gaps here with some of these hits. The guy's hitting for power. He's not going to hit 300, but I mean, get that up around 260. Like seems like the trend with some of these guys. If he hits for power and that Astros lineup gets it going, I mean, they've got some talent in that lineup. Just off to a really bad start. I think he could end up having himself a nice season, and he's really cheap, and he's got some flexibility at second and third as well.
Yeah, definitely. One guy that's kind of scary in that range is Evan Longoria, is only hitting 216 while he's hitting 250 on balls in play.
Yeah,
that's tough. He's looked pretty good at the plate. He's just not really making good contact right now. 157 ISO, but 16% walk rate's pretty solid. 16% K rate's right in line with his career average. I'm hoping he gets it turned around, but I mean the numbers don't look great.
Yeah. What really hurts with Longoria is it seems like he just has no protection in that lineup. I mean, he's been hitting right around fourth most nights, and then right behind him, Desmond Jennings a lot of nights. Desmond Jennings is awful so far this season. So I mean, pitchers seeing this and they're just going ahead and going after Longoria, and he's chasing bad pitches, trying to make something out of nothing. And if you don't have protection behind you, it's going to be tough for a guy like him. That's why he's got such a high walk rate, I would guess, 16.1%.
Definitely. And then we can go all the way to the bottom and talk about the Chase Utley of third baseman over here, Aramis Ramirez, with his 11 WRC plus.
Oh man, high score.
Yeah, I mean, 167 average, 186 on balls in play. Has yet to walk on the season. That's fantastic.
That's just awful. I mean, that tells you.
An 18% strikeout rate. Yeah, I mean, he's struggling. He's always a slow starter, but this is really rough.
Yeah, it's getting to be bad. I mean, we're almost a full month in by now, and he hasn't walked a single time. I mean, I feel like I could have gone up there 60 sometimes and seen 4 balls out of 7. But either way, maybe not. I probably would have got afraid by a pitch too far inside and backed up. Either way, moving on to the outfield. In case you haven't noticed, Adam Jones is raking again this season. He's got a 339 ISO, 424 average, 521 WOBA. Only striking out 9.1% of the time, which, I mean, you see power hitters like Adam Jones like this, and then you see that he's got a low strikeout rate under 10%. I mean, that tells you he's seeing the ball so well right now. And, I mean, especially against lefties, but even against righties right now, he's just getting it done. And he makes for one of the best guys to pay up for in the outfield most nights right now.
Yeah, definitely. You got to feel really good about him. The other guy up there is Lorenzo Cain, that's just had a fantastic start to the year. He's looked good against everybody. He's always been a guy that hits lefties really well. But like Donaldson, I mean, he's looked great. He's over 400 on balls in play. That's going to regress some, of course. But a 196 ISO, he could pull that off for the whole season, honestly. I mean, he's looked fantastic so far. 9% walk rate, really low. 11.9% K rate is really solid. Especially when he's hitting that well on balls in play. You want to put the ball in play as much as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, he's doing it all, too. I mean, he's got 5 steals, 12 RBIs, and 13 runs. I mean, he's like
and
MVP
2 home
numbers.
runs. Yeah, he's hitting more power than he usually does, too.
Yeah.
And then if we're talking about power, Nelson Cruz is the next guy on this list, hitting 328 and has 8 home runs already.
Yep.
Especially playing for the Mariners, that's just really impressive, playing all those games at Safeco. No one else on the Mariners has been hitting really well. We mentioned Cano has been struggling. Kyle Seager is another guy that's been average at best so far in the middle of that Mariners lineup. So it's been really impressive how good he's been.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other guys around here. Here's a guy who got off to a really bad start, was striking out a ton, kind of turning around. Gregory Polanco, 30.6% strikeout rate still. You certainly don't assume it's going to stay that high. And his BABIP, 425. Obviously, that's going to regress a little bit. But he's up to a 300 batting average, which, considering how much he's struck out so far this season, really is impressive. He has 5 steals, 6 RBI, 7 runs scored, and a homer so far. So he's a guy that I think you can continue to target that's a little bit cheap right now, that's doing what we all kind of expected Andrew McCutchen to be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Outside of the strikeout rate, that is.
Yeah, and his price, like you said, is fantastic right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll move down here to some of the guys that are struggling, and some big names down here as well, as there have been. Giancarlo Stanton was the guy that was down here for a little while. He's
Yep.
finally started to get it going. I think he's got 4 homers in his last 7 games, something like that. Negative 11 WRC plus Marlon Byrd. Don't play him. Some guy won a GPP with him on his team the other day, and I mean, good for you winning GPP. You didn't deserve it because Marlon Byrd is just god awful right now. Jose Bautista, despite the fact he's been missing time right now, it's just been terrible. Got 4 home runs, but I mean, not much else. I mean, he's been just absolutely terrible. His BABIP 0.97, so obviously that's going to regress, or that's going to bump up a little bit. And Carlos Gonzalez, I think, a guy that many people are actually concerned about. He's just looked terrible at the plate so far.
Yeah, he's down in the 6 hole now too most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, they finally went ahead and bumped up Corey Dickerson up into the 2 hole most nights now, especially against righties, because he's getting it done and Cargo's not. So you like to think he'll turn things around, but I mean, this is probably the worst start of his career at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he just doesn't look great. He's another guy, he's playing a lot of games in Coors, so you think he's going to get it going at some point. I mean, he's going to have some hot streaks, but yeah, he has not looked good. He didn't have a great year last year either. He got hot a couple times. I think that's probably the same kind of season we're going to get out of him this year. Yeah. We mentioned Steve Pearce already at first base. He's another guy down here. Adam Eaton is a guy we've talked about on this a few times. He's really struggling still. He's really hurting that White Sox lineup when they have Abreu hitting well now and he's not getting on base in front of them. So that's tough. You mentioned Desmond Jennings is another guy down here who's just been not good.
Yeah.
He hasn't been striking out as much as I honestly would have guessed because he hasn't looked very good at the plate, but 196 average on a 220 batting average on balls in play. I mean, you can't feel very good about him right now.
No, not at all. And one more little tidbit I kind of wanted to mention here, where I was noticing some walk rates of some of these guys, especially the guys who aren't hitting particularly well. The highest walk rate among all outfielders is Curtis Granderson, 21.9% walk rate right now. I mean, the guy scored 11 runs, so he's getting on base mostly because of these walks. So if he can start hitting the ball, I mean, he has a .020 ISO, so obviously that's concerning at his age right now. But I mean, if he can start swinging the bat better, I mean, the way he's being patient at the plate, that Mets offense is on fire right now. So he could end up being a nice value continually still. Yeah,
one guy that has really interesting numbers in the outfield is Jock Peterson for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
He's got the 478 batting average on balls in play, but he's only hitting 295 somehow.
Yeah.
But he's got 2 home runs with an ISO of 227 and a 21% walk rate, but also a 33% K rate. And this isn't like a small sample size either. It's 57 at bats.
Yeah. He's like the 3-way hitter. I mean, it's a home run, a strikeout, or a walk.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, his numbers are wild. Like, that batting average on balls in play is crazy for someone that's only put 50% of his balls in play.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild.
Yeah, those are some crazy numbers. And I mean, he's got significant upside. We saw him. He was a great prospect in the minors.
Yeah.
Been batting around 7th, unfortunately. But, I mean, you get yourself a Dodgers stack, maybe go a little contrarian and get him down in there. And he's got yourself some nice upside. Always going to be low-owned in that batting spot. So, with that, hopefully we helped you guys out with some trends moving forward and gave you a little bit of Sunday content here. Follow us on Twitter at DF Cafe and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com. And we'll see you guys on Monday.